Good afternoon, and we are here with the text, The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. And today we shall be going to the introduction portion. And for our discussion, we shall be uh, extensively and intensively go to the text. And the text is not the French version at all, rather the translated version. And for this translated edition, we are taking Jonathan Cape edition of The Second Sex, and the translator uh, is H.M. Parsley. So H.M. Parsley is the translator, and Parsley has written a preface also from the end of the translator, and in that preface we find some of the very basic ideas that Parsley has wanted to share with the reader, and that will be very helpful for our understanding. Now, before I go to the text and what exactly that Parsley was trying to share with us all, the basic pattern as the construction of the text, The Second Sex by Beauvoir was made. The whole text is divided into two parts, primarily, into volumes. The first volume is all about facts and myth, and the second one is all about woman's life today. In our previous classes, we mentioned that since translators are getting changed, so are the nomenclatures, so are the names as well. So what we find here, the second volume is titled as Women's Life Today. It is not exactly the same in other version of the translation. So it doesn't make much trouble in that sense. Now, each of the volume that we have, for the volume 1, that is Facts and Myths, we have 3 parts. And for the second volume that we have, it has 4 different parts at the same time. And each and every part has several other chapters. You know, in some cases, the chapters have title. And for the rest, some chapters are without any title. And there is an introduction written by Simone de Beauvoir, and there is a conclusion with which the text comes to an end. Now, I was trying to say that the preface of the translator is significant because it is interesting also, since the translator would like to share some of the important and significant issues that the translator actually came across while translating a text like this. Now, the translator is trying to say that introduction portion picks up. Introduction portion highlights some of the very basic trends only because here we find Simone de Beauvoir is, I quote the translator here, at pains to point out some of the woman question. So it seems very well in the introduction, as the translator has rightly pointed out, that the translator is making it clear somehow the author is at pain. She is suffering inwardly. The inner suffering is something that cannot be denied. Now, Beauvoir is taking in the introduction, as we can see, references, multifarious references from different textual references, social references, and cultural references to highlight, to make her ideas more and more clear in front of the readers. And not only she is raising the problems, but also she is also addressing some of the possible solutions that we can meet here, that we can face here. Now, Beauvoir's perspective that we find here is basically existential ethics. The existential ethics that she had that background, preparation for long, reading that Western philosophy in every possible way. So we find that existential ethics works a lot in that perspective reflected in the introduction of The Second Sex. And at the same time, she is more or less very much focused on the existentialism of Sartre. So, keeping all those things, this is how the translator is actually looking at. The translator is actually trying to understand, decipher the technicalities that Simone de Beauvoir is trying to attempt in the introduction. Now, before we move to that text, the introduction, I would like to just, one very significant remark that the translator has made, that if I quote directly from the translator's preface, that the reader who is indifferent to existentialism or even in opposition to existentialism, it will nevertheless will gain pleasure and profit in plenty. So you may support as a reader to the existentialist thought of Simone de Beauvoir and of Sartre, or you may not have that kind of support. You may oppose the kind of, this particular idealism that is reflected over there. But obviously, they will get plenty of pleasure, and profit is, of course, an added attraction while reading Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex, and obviously it is there in the introduction. Now, I would like to go to the text, because the text begins with a kind of a sort of hesitation. The famous introduction of Simone de Beauvoir's second text begins with a hesitation. And we find the author is hesitating. So why is the hesitation? So I think it will be easier to understand if we go to the text directly. I quote from the text. For a long time, I have hesitated to write a book on Oman. This is how the text begins, introduction begins. The subject is irritating. Please mark the words that Beauvoir is trying to use continuously. The subject is irritating, especially to women, and it is not new. So Beauvoir is claiming that she is not going to do something new, because before Beauvoir, so many other thinkers of the society, they have also attempted to do such kind of approach. They have also tried to highlight the woman question. They have also, attempted to pinpoint some of the crucial questions regarding the position of women in the society. I continue. Enough ink has been spilled in quarreling over feminism, and perhaps we should say no more about it. It is still talked about. However, for the voluminous nonsense uttered during the last century seems to have done little to illuminate the problem. So it is a big question that I find here, that the voluminous nonsense. So many people, whoever have some ideas that she or he has to say something on the woman question, they have come forward, they have said a lot. So it's a juxtaposition. The huge amount of text, huge amount of ideas. So without solving the problem, the real life problem, the social and the cultural problem that a woman faces everyday life, we find without having the solution, what they are actually getting here is problem. And it's a juxtaposition of thoughts. And it is such a difficult knot that they have already seen, they have come across. So it is hardly can be released in that way. So this irritation was in the mind of Simone de Beauvoir while writing Second Sex, and she is very much with the kind of a question. So what to do? What is it all about? Now, with these preliminary words, then she comes up with that very famous question. And the famous question is very well noted, popular, that we find. And the famous question is, what is a woman? But first we must ask, I quote Beauvoir here, first we must ask, what is a woman? And she quotes Toto Molière in Utero, and she says one woman is a womb. In speaking of certain women, connoisseurs declare that there are not a women, although they are equipped with a uterus like the rest. All agree in recognizing the fact that females exist in the human species. Today, as always, they make up about 1/2 of humanity, and yet we are told that femininity is in danger. We are exhorted to be, we remain women, become women. So this very line in the introduction, I must say, is a kind of a valuable remark that we are exhorted to be women, remain women, and become women. So we women, we know what is our position in the society, but we hardly do anything. And later, in so many places, Simone de Beauvoir will be there to say that women are basically used to, they are actually in a kind of a mental satisfaction that they are okay, what is happening to them? They are used to having the kind of event happening in their lives, and there is no problem at all. They don't question why is it so in their case. And they want to be women as they are women as usual, and they are in that process since generations after generations. So, so why is it so? Why is no question on the part of the women proper? I continue from the text. Is this attribute something secreted by the ovaries? Or is it a Platonic essence, a product of the philosophic imagination? Is the rustling petticoat essence enough to bring it down to earth? Although some women try jealously to incarnate the essence, it is hardly patentable. It is frequently described in vague and dazzling terms that seem to have been borrowed from the vocabulary of the seers, and indeed in the times of St. Thomas, it was considered an essence as certainly defined as a somniferous virtue of the poppy. So somehow a kind of a very pathetic assertion, a sympathetic and very mournful heart that we find on the part of the writer, on the part of the thinker Simone de Beauvoir, that why is that condition? Is it that secretion of the ovaries that for which the woman, they don't stand up? They don't stand up, they claim their right that they are actually destined to have. Why is it so? Now, as we move through the text, as we go more and more to the text, we find that famous, idea, that social hierarchy that Beauvoir is trying to focus here, that the man in one hand and the woman on the other, and the woman is categorized as quote unquote other. So this hierarchical ranking is very much there, and women are satisfied. They have no problem at all. So why is the binary? She talks a lot about the binary, the man-woman binary. So let's read out directly from the text. What was the opinion of Simone de Beauvoir regarding this man-woman binary that is very much prevalent in the society? I quote Beauvoir. But does the word woman then have no specific content? This is stoutly affirmed by those who hold to the philosophy of the Enlightenment, of rationalism, of nominalism. Women to them are merely the human beings arbitrarily designated by the word woman. Many American women particularly are prepared to think that there is no longer any place for woman as such. Look, women have already started to think that this is their destiny. This is what can happen to them only. So there is no problem. What is happening, let them happen. So many American women particularly are prepared to think that there is no longer any place for woman as such. If a backward individual still takes herself for a woman, her friends advise her to be psychoanalyzed and thus get rid of the obsession. Beauvoir is referring to a text in regard to a work, Modern Woman, the Lost Sex, which in other respects has its irritating feature. Dorothy Parker has written, I cannot be just to books which treat woman as woman. My idea is that all of us, men as well as women, should be regarded as human beings. So here comes Simone de Beauvoir's statement. Here comes Simone de Beauvoir, how far she is actually supporting, going hand in hand with the opinion of Dorothy Parker. And it is very clear that she is supporting Dorothy Parker's view that men as well as women should be regarded as human beings. We shouldn't make such kind of categorization. You know, women are just like men. And that she continues after a few lines later in the introduction. Surely, woman is like man, a human being. That probably woman herself have started forgetting this one. And here is the problem. So, surely, woman is like man, a human being. But such a declaration is abstract. The fact is that every concrete human being is always a singular, separate individual. Everyone is singular, separate individual. To decline to accept such notion as the eternal feminine, the black soul, the Jewish character, is not to deny that Jews, Negroes, women exist today. This denial does not represent a liberation for those concerned, but rather a flight from reality. So think that everyone has his or her own right. And this idea of that Simone de Beauvoir will next go to make it more and more transparent for all the readers, the idea of alterity. What is alterity actually? Alterity is a very technical term. The word has a Latin connection and also French connection as well. The alterity is derived from the Latin word alteritas. And alteritas means the state of being other. So here comes the idea of alterity that particularly focuses the state of being other or different, diversity, otherness. Look, Simone de Beauvoir here actually talks about this otherness of the women folk, the otherness of the women identity. And the alterity is very much prevalent in the society and it is there for long. And this is something women herself has started to believe in, according to Simone de Beauvoir. But Simone de Beauvoir wants to make all the human beings think that men and women both are same. Both are human beings. And one should not forget this social position at all. Now, they are obviously biologically different. No doubt. Men has a different biological structure and the women have a different biological structure. This biological, regarding the biological differences, there is no problem at all. Now the problem regarding this anatomy, we have nothing to say. But somehow this biological identity becomes more and more pervasive. This biological identity becomes more and more highlighted. And this is something that actually denying the other rights of woman. Woman as an intellectual being, this particular identity is no longer focused and highlighted. So how are the women looked at? Beauvoir is saying that there are actually no individual identity that the women are actually enjoying. They can be individual, somehow neither the male nor the women themselves, they claim for their own individual identity, but they are basically collective identity. Women are basically as observed as sexual object and reproductive body that they carry with them all the time. What happens in the case of the male? In the case of the male, it is something else. Man as subject has a different identity, far, far away from the women. And they declare that, in case of a male, it is something more about ambition, more about freedom, more about imagination. But we don't find such kind of freedom, imagination, ambition that the woman can think of. It is something that they are denied of any ambition. It is something they are denied of any kind of imagination or freedom that in which they have their own rights as well. So this is something that the women should think properly, that they should, be introspective about this kind of identity actually. So Beauvoir's concept of alterity, that fundamental human thought, it has to be changed. It has to be, modified. It should not be continued any longer because we have passed a long time and it is the high time that we need to discontinue such kind of a thought and thinking process. Now, as I was saying regarding this Beauvoir's philosophical and intellectual background, and we know it well by this time that she was very much influenced by the German philosopher Hegel. Now, Hegel, who once upon a time said that a fundamental hostility to any other consciousness, a fundamental hostility to any other consciousness is found in the consciousness itself. For example, someone is hostile to someone. Now, the person who is hostile to the other, the problem lies in the person because the kind of internal anxiety, the identity crisis that they are suffering from. So because of the identity crisis, because of the existential crisis that they are actually having at that very moment, for which they often hostile to the opposite sex, they are often hostile to the, opposition, those who are on the other side, those to them they categorize as other. So this is how. This is a kind of a very crucial psychoanalytical problem that it is very much there. And it was Hegel who made it very clear. So this is this opposition, that identity crisis on the part of the male, probably for which they categorize the female counterpart as others. And that's why, what an individual is very much in trouble with, they think that, okay, so they are out of the comfort zone. Since they are out of the comfort zone, so what is happening? So they are in a kind of they are saying that those are non-essential. And the comfort zone in which this kind of, here in the case of the male genre, male people, and they are having that, okay, this comfort zone is their essential identity, essential pace, essential, space. and they cannot cope up with the other end. So here comes the problem. Comes the problem of essential and the non-essential. They categorize the other more and more non-essential, since they know it very well that that identity is not a cup of tea for them, and this is something very different for their own understanding. So the idea of essential and the idea of the non-essential, it becomes clear when we come up with this idea of how the patriarchal society is trying to categorize the female as other. Beauvoir goes on saying some of the very other issues as well. And she talks a lot about history of human tradition. He talks a lot about history of human culture, and how the division of the sexes biologically, how it creates these are basically the roots. These are basically the roots on which the social problems actually developed since ancient time. And women as individual, women as characters in our society, so they live among the males, not having their separate identity, rather they are in most cases dispersed. They don't have an isolated identity. Women cannot actually stay in the society being isolated. Rather, they are dispersed among the men. And this process of othering, which has been in the process so long, we find that men are, of course, close to the women because of the biological need, because of the sexual desire, because of the wish for the posterity, for the children, whatever it may be. But somehow we find that the position of the woman remains same, at least till the time when Simone de Beauvoir was writing this text. Women are not liberated of their own. That actual social freedom, social liberation, intellectual liberation, which was necessary for women, that they haven't till then received no such kind of a thing. The relationship is more about master and the slave, that we mentioned when we were talking about the master-slave dialectic. It is more about the master and the slave. Women have the same potentiality to be a master, but somehow they are used to being in that position of slavery, social, cultural slavery, that is very much there. So the master-slave dialectic once again can be found in the man and the woman relationship, as Simone de Beauvoir was attempting to point out in her assertion. In the introductory section, in the introduction of the second sex, she is trying to highlight in that particular relationship prevalent very much there. And another very significant issue for which women are basically dependent on the males only because of the economic need. Okay? Economic need, economic necessity, for which women are not at all free. And later, in case of Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own, we shall be fortunate to read those brilliant lines by Virginia Woolf later on, that women need to have a room of her own. They need financial assistance, they need a space of their own, and then only they can do wonders. So we generally find that this financial protection, so long our women are financially self-dependent, this social slavery will continue. And even after writing a text like this one, that was of 1949, even today, we don't find that all women are economically dependent. You know, they are not even today economically independent, and they have to be more and more economically dependent. And that is the only reason when social crimes having in the family every day, lack of space for the women, lack of space, lack of liberty, lack of individual identity is very much connected to this economic freedom that the women of our time should have. You know, the kind of complicit nature, the kind of compromising being as other that the women are actually having so long. Somehow it seems that they are very comfortable with the identity like this. It needs a drastic change. That Simone de Beauvoir would like to say in the introduction of the second sex. So they need a kind of a jerk. They need a kind of a, rethinking process. So why are they complacent? Why are they satisfied with that identity of otherness? So it should be shake off. Rather, they should, think differently. They should be economically self-dependent, and then only gradually, obviously it will take a long time to change that social scenario. But these technical issues are very much identified, very perfectly identified by Simone de Beauvoir in the introductory section. So that I had in brief, introduction section is quite lengthy in size and so many other issues as well. But in brief, we can say these are some of the basic ideas that we can find over there. And it will, we need to reread a text like this. An introduction portion will, it will map up what the author, the writer, the thinker Simone de Beauvoir is actually trying to say, actually going to say in the next chapters and the several sections. Thank you. That was from my end today on the introduction that Simone de Beauvoir wrote, and the significance and some of the basic ideas that she highlighted over there. Thank you so much.